The plumber called at 11:14 on a Tuesday morning. I was in the backyard, pulling weeds from the garden that my wife had planted 12 years ago and that I had let go half to seed since she died. His name was Frank Bellows. I had hired him to fix a slow leak under the utility sink in the basement, the one that had been dripping for 8 months, the one I kept meaning to deal with and never did. I almost didn't answer. My knees were dirty and my reading glasses were inside, and I figured it was probably nothing. Probably he just needed to shut off the main water line and wanted to let me know. Then I read the text he sent half a second later. "Sir, I need you to come downstairs right now. Please don't call anyone first." I was down the basement steps in 40 seconds. Frank was a big man, maybe 50, with a gray beard and the kind of hands that had spent 30 years solving problems other people couldn't see. I had hired him twice before over the years. Good man, quiet, professional. He was standing in the far corner of the basement, near the old coal room that we had never used for anything except storing boxes, and he was holding a flashlight in one hand and he was pointing at the wall with the other. His face looked like a man who had just seen something he couldn't explain. "Mr. Hartley," he said, "you're going to want to see this." The old coal room had a wooden door, thick and heavy, painted over so many times the hinges barely moved. I had opened it exactly once in 18 years, when we first bought the house, and found nothing inside but a dirt floor and stone walls and the smell of something old. After that, I forgot it existed. The door was open now. Frank had gone in to check the water pipes that ran along the shared wall and found that one section of stone near the back didn't sound right when he knocked on it. "Too hollow," he said. "Not like the rest." He'd pressed on it and a section of the wall had shifted. Not stone at all. A panel, built to look like stone. Behind it was a space carved out of the foundation, roughly 3 feet wide and 4 feet deep, lined with cedar boards someone had installed carefully and deliberately. Inside the space were a fireproof document box, a small laptop, and a canvas shopping bag with handles. On top of the document box was an envelope. My name was written on the front in my wife's handwriting. Margaret. My wife had been gone for 3 years. She had died in what the police called a home invasion gone wrong, though nothing was taken and no one was ever charged. I had buried her on a cold morning in November, held my daughter's hand through the whole service, driven home to a house that no longer felt like mine, and spent 36 months trying to figure out how to keep existing without the person who had been my whole world for 27 years. I picked up the envelope. Frank cleared his throat. "You want me to wait outside?" "Please stay," I said. My voice sounded strange to me, far away. "I don't want to be alone right now." He nodded and didn't say another word. The envelope was sealed. I opened it carefully, like it might dissolve if I moved too fast. Inside were 6 pages, handwritten on the cream-colored notepad she kept on her desk in the study upstairs, the one with her initials embossed at the top. M.L.H., Margaret Louise Hartley. She had used the same notepad for grocery lists and birthday cards and thank you notes, and now she had used it for this. "My darling, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me, and I am so sorry. I am sorry for every secret I kept, for every moment I should have told you and didn't, for the weight I carried alone when I should have let you carry half of it. I kept quiet to protect you and the girls. I want you to know that, whatever else you feel after you read this, everything I did for love. I need to tell you about Gerald Marsh." I set the pages down for a moment and breathed. Gerald Marsh was the executive director of the Lakeview Children's Foundation, a nonprofit that funded cancer treatment for families who couldn't afford it. Margaret had been their director of finance for 9 years. She loved that job more than any she'd ever had. She used to come home talking about the kids she'd seen in the office that afternoon, the ones who were in remission, the ones who had made it through, the parents who cried when they handed over the paperwork because it meant their child was going to be okay. She said she had never felt more useful in her life. I kept reading. In the winter of the year before she died, Margaret wrote, she had noticed something wrong in the foundation's accounts. Small things first. Transfers between internal accounts that didn't match the board minutes, vendor payments to companies she couldn't verify, a line item for event catering that was 3 times the actual invoice she found in the filing cabinet. She thought it was bookkeeping error at first. She went back through 2 years of records and realized it wasn't error at all. It was theft. Gerald Marsh had been embezzling from the foundation for at least 4 years. Not carelessly, not sloppily, carefully, patiently, moving small amounts across dozens of accounts, creating shell vendors, routing payments through a management consulting firm that existed only on paper. Over 4 years, he had taken just under $2 million from a charity that paid for chemotherapy for children who had no other options. Margaret had spent 6 months building a case before she told anyone. She had made copies of everything, documented every transfer, traced every shell company. She had done it methodically and quietly because she understood that Marsh had connections. He sat on 2 city council committees. He golfed with the county prosecutor. His wife was close friends with the police chief's wife. Margaret had written that she didn't know who she could trust, so she trusted no one until she had everything she needed. Then she made a mistake. She went to the foundation's board chairman, a man named Robert Culp, thinking he was outside Marsh's circle. She laid out the evidence in a private meeting. Culp listened, asked careful questions, told her she had done the right thing, promised to take it to the authorities immediately. 3 days later, Marsh called her into his office and closed the door. He told her that he knew what she had done. He told her that Culp was his oldest friend. He told her that the evidence she had gathered would disappear, that her career would be destroyed, and that if she continued to pursue this, she would regret it in ways she couldn't imagine. He said it calmly, reasonably, the way a man says something when he knows he has all the power in the room. Then he said something else. He said, "I know you have 2 daughters, Margaret. I know where they live." She wrote that she had driven home that evening, shaking so badly she had to pull over twice. She wrote that she had sat in our driveway for 20 minutes before she felt steady enough to walk inside and kiss me hello and ask what I wanted for dinner. She wrote that she had looked at my face across the table that night and thought, "I cannot tell him. He will go straight to Marsh's office and that man will destroy him. I have to finish this myself." So she built this room. She had hired a contractor the previous spring, paid him in cash, told him she needed secure storage for sensitive documents related to her work. She had done it on a day when I was out of town. She had spent 3 weeks organizing everything inside it. Every document, every transfer record, every piece of evidence she had gathered. The laptop contained backup copies of everything, plus her own notes, recorded in her voice, dated and time-stamped, explaining each piece of evidence in detail so that whoever found it could follow her reasoning without needing her there to explain. She had written the letter because she knew she might not be. The document box combination, she wrote, was the address of the coffee shop in Indianapolis, where we had our first date, 4172. I remembered the address without even thinking. I had driven past that coffee shop twice in the last year just to see it still standing. "I don't know if he will do anything," she wrote near the end of the letter. "Maybe he will decide I'm not worth the risk. Maybe having Culp in his corner is enough for him and he'll leave me alone. But I want this to exist in case he doesn't. I want there to be a record. I want the truth to outlast whatever he does to me. Take this to the FBI. Not the county prosecutor's office and not the local police. The FBI field office in Chicago. There is an agent there named Patricia Okafor. I've done some research. She has a reputation for taking white-collar crime seriously, and she has no connection to this county. She is who you need. Please, get justice for the families who trusted that foundation. For the children who needed that money and didn't get it because a greedy man stole it. Do that first. Then grieve, my darling. Grieve as much as you need to. But then live. The girls need their father. They need to see you choose life, even after everything. I need you to choose life. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. And I need you to know that I would do all of it again. Every year, every hard day, every beautiful day, every ordinary Tuesday morning. All of it. I would choose you every single time. Tell our daughters I love them until I can't be told anymore. All of my heart, always. Margaret. I don't know how long I stood in that basement. At some point, Frank put a hand briefly on my shoulder and didn't say anything, and that was the right thing to do, and I have never forgotten it. Let me tell you about Margaret. We met in 1991 at a conference for regional accountants in Indianapolis. I was 31, working as a project manager for a civil engineering firm, attending the conference because my company had sent me to look at tax strategy options. She was 29, already 3 years into her career, sharper than anyone else in the room, and apparently deeply amused by the fact that I walked directly into a glass door trying to get to the coffee station. She brought me a cup and sat down across from me and said, "That was genuinely impressive. We talked for 4 hours. I asked her to dinner that same evening. She was everything I wanted to be, and wasn't, quite. Patient in a way I struggled to be. Perceptive in a way that sometimes bordered on unnerving. She could tell when I was lying about being fine before I had finished the sentence. She could walk into a room and know within 2 minutes who the difficult person was going to be. She had a laugh that started somewhere deep and came out like something she hadn't entirely planned on, loud and unguarded and real. And it was the best sound I have ever heard in my life. We were married in 1993. Our older daughter was born in 1996, and our younger in 1999. Watching Margaret become a mother was like watching someone come fully into their own power. She was fierce in a way I hadn't seen before, not because she was afraid, but because she knew exactly what mattered, and she was not going to let anything happen to it. She coached soccer for years. She drove every carpool. She was the mother other kids asked if they could call when something was wrong. When she took the job at the foundation, I watched her fall in love with work the way some people fall in love with a person. She would come home lit up in a way that made me happy just to see. She used to say the job felt like a reason, and I knew exactly what she meant. I did not know that the same organization would get her killed. The death had been ruled a home invasion. A window broken in the back of the house, signs of forced entry Margaret found at the bottom of the basement stairs. The coroner said she had fallen. Blunt force trauma to the head, consistent with a fall down wooden stairs in the dark. The detective assigned to the case was a man named Fowler, who had asked me the same 6 questions 3 different times, and then called me 6 weeks later to say the case had no leads and was being set aside. I had accepted it because there was nothing else to accept. Because the alternative required believing that the world was a different and much worse place than I had been living in. And I was 61 years old and already grieving, and I did not have the strength to hold that belief. Margaret had held it alone. She had known she was in danger, known that a powerful man with connections to local law enforcement wanted her silenced, and she had built a fireproof room in the basement and prepared for her own death and never said a word to me because she was trying to keep me safe. I opened the document box. 4172, it opened on the first try. Inside were 43 file folders, each labeled in Margaret's precise handwriting. Each one contained printed copies of financial records, wire transfer confirmations, corporate registry documents for the shell companies, photographs taken from her car in the foundation's parking lot, and a small index card at the front of each folder explaining in 2 or 3 sentences what the contents proved. She had organized everything for a stranger, for someone who would have to understand it without her. I packed everything into a large duffel bag from the utility closet, the laptop, the document box with the files, the canvas bag which contained 3 USB drives and a handwritten timeline that ran to 11 pages. I paid Frank in full and told him a version of the truth, that my wife had left some documents hidden that turned out to be important, that I would explain more later, but for now I needed him to forget he had been here today. He looked at me for a long moment and said, "My wife would have done something like this. She was that kind of woman too." And then he shook my hand and left. I sat in my car in the driveway for a few minutes thinking about my daughters. My older daughter lived 40 minutes away with her husband and their 2 children. My younger daughter was in Portland. Neither of them knew what I had just found. Neither of them knew their mother had been murdered. I would have to tell them. But not yet. Not until I had done what Margaret asked. I drove to Chicago the next morning. It took 4 days to get through to Agent Patricia Okafor. When I finally reached her and explained who I was and what I had found, she asked me 3 rapid questions and then went quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Mr. Hartley, can you be in my office tomorrow morning at 9?" I was there at 8:45. Agent Okafor was a small, precise woman in her mid-40s who listened to everything I said without interrupting and took notes by hand and asked follow-up questions that made it clear she understood complex financial structures better than most accountants I had met in 30 years. When I finished, she asked to see the document box. She went through the first 4 folders without looking up, then she set them down and said, "How long ago did your wife put this together?" "Over the last year of her life," I said. "She started in the winter before she died." Okafor looked at me carefully. She said, "I'm going to need to have forensic accountants go through all of this. But from what I can see in just these 4 folders, your wife built a case that most investigators would take 2 years to construct with a full team. And she did it alone while continuing to work for this man." "Yes," I said. "She was extraordinary," Okafor said, "and it was not a performance." She meant it. The FBI assembled a task force and worked for 11 weeks. They traced every shell company, verified every transfer, identified the accounts where the stolen money had landed. They found a property in Cancun registered to a holding company that traced back to Marsh through 3 layers of ownership. They interviewed 12 former employees of the foundation who had each noticed something small and been afraid to say so. They found Gerald Culp, who turned out to be not merely Marsh's friend but a secondary beneficiary, having received what Marsh had described to him as consulting fees through one of the shell companies. He cooperated immediately once he understood the evidence against him. They found Detective Fowler, who had received 2 payments totaling $18,000 from one of Marsh's personal accounts, one the week after Margaret died and one 4 months later. He had closed the investigation in exchange for money. The forensic team that examined the foundation of the house in preparation for the case review made a formal finding. The window in the back of the house had been broken from the inside. There were marks on the frame consistent with staging. The angle of impact that caused Margaret's head injury was not consistent with an accidental fall, but was consistent with a blow delivered while she was standing. The medical examiner, re-examining the original autopsy with this context, changed her conclusion. Margaret had been murdered. Gerald Marsh was arrested on a Tuesday morning at a fundraising luncheon for the very foundation he had been stealing from, seated at a table with a pediatric oncologist and a family whose 10-year-old daughter had received a kidney transplant 2 years earlier using funds the foundation had provided. 3 agents walked in while the salads were being served. He looked at the agents and then he looked around the room, and I think in that moment he understood that it was over. He did not run. He stood up slowly and put his hands out and let them put the handcuffs on. I watched the arrest report from Agent Okafor's office, where she had invited me to be present. She had said, "You deserve to see this in real time." I called my daughters that evening. My older daughter drove to my house and we sat on the back porch until midnight. My younger daughter flew in 3 days later, and we all went to the cemetery together. I had not been out there in months, which I felt guilty about, but Margaret would not have cared. She was practical about things like that. She used to say that cemeteries were for the living, and that she planned to haunt me in much more inconvenient places. I told them what their mother had done, the whole story. I had typed out a summary because I didn't trust myself to say it out loud without losing the thread. My older daughter read it twice without speaking. Then she said, "She never told you any of this?" She was trying to protect us. My younger daughter, who processes things differently, who needed to walk around the yard 3 times before she could speak, finally came back and sat down and said, "She was braver than anyone I've ever known." "Yes," I said. She was. The trial began 7 months later. I attended every session. Marsh's attorney argued that the financial irregularities were the result of accounting errors and that the evidence collected by a dead woman and hidden in a basement was inherently unreliable. Nobody believed him. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Guilty on all counts. Embezzlement, conspiracy, obstruction, and second-degree murder. 27 years. No possibility of parole before 18. When the verdict was read, I was sitting in the second row. Marsh turned around once. I don't know what he was looking for. I held up Margaret's letter so he could see it. The handwritten pages, still in the plastic sleeve I'd put them in to preserve them. He turned away and didn't look at me again. Culp pled guilty to fraud in exchange for a reduced sentence. Fowler pled guilty to obstruction of justice and bribery. He lost his pension. The Lakeview Children's Foundation underwent a complete reconstruction of its board and executive staff. $2,400,000 in stolen funds were recovered through civil asset forfeiture and returned to the Foundation's operating accounts. They renamed the scholarship program that funded treatment for uninsured children the Margaret Hartley Fund. My daughters and I attended the ceremony where they unveiled the sign. My younger daughter cried and didn't try to stop herself. My older daughter squeezed my hand and I squeezed back, and neither of us said anything because there wasn't anything to say that the moment wasn't already saying better. I am 64 years old now. I still live in the same house. I go into the basement regularly, which I hadn't done for months after Margaret died because it was the last place she was, and that was unbearable. I've cleaned it out, organized it, put in better lighting. The coal room is empty now, the cedar panels removed, the space behind the false wall filled in. But I know where it is, and sometimes I stand near that corner of the basement and I think about her in that small space, alone. Carefully labeling file folders and recording notes in her voice, preparing for a future she hoped she would live to see but knew she might not. She was 61 years old when she died. 61 years old and still the sharpest mind in any room she entered. Still the person other people turned to when things got hard. Still the woman who brought a cup of coffee to a stranger who had walked into a glass door and saw something worth knowing in the man on the other side of his own embarrassment. I have her letter. It's in a frame in the study now, the room she used to sit in on Sunday mornings with her coffee and her papers spread across the desk. I had it preserved in archival glass, the way you'd preserve something important, which is what it is. Frank Bellows came back the following spring to address some other plumbing work that had been neglected. We had coffee at the kitchen table before he started, and I told him everything. He sat quietly through the whole story, and when I finished, he said, "That's a woman worth knowing." I told him that was exactly right. My older daughter's children are 7 and 9 now. They know that their grandmother was a hero. My older daughter has told them the story in age-appropriate pieces, adding more each year as they can hold more of it. The 9-year-old recently asked why Grandma didn't just tell the police right away. My daughter told me she had explained that sometimes the people who are supposed to protect us are the same people who need to be afraid of us, and that your grandmother knew the difference, which is why she trusted herself. My younger daughter finished a project she has been working on for the past year. She is a writer, always has been, and she has written a long account of what Margaret did, carefully documented, rigorously factual. She submitted it to 2 magazines. Both accepted it immediately. It will be published in the spring. The Foundation has already reached out to say they plan to use it in their annual report. She sent me the draft last month and I read it twice and called her and told her that her mother would be furious at being described as heroic and would have deflected every compliment and eventually demanded to change the subject to something she considered more interesting. My daughter laughed. She has her mother's laugh, deep and unguarded and real. I still have questions I will never answer. Did Margaret consider telling me? There must have been evenings when I was sitting across the table from her and she was deciding again not to say anything, and I wonder what her face looked like in those moments and whether I missed something I should have seen. Did she know the morning she died that Marsh had made his decision? Did she have time to be afraid? Was there a moment, at the end, when she thought of me? I choose to believe she didn't know it was coming. I choose to believe the morning was ordinary. That the coffee was good and the light was coming in the kitchen window the way it does in early November, that sideways, golden fall light, and that she was thinking about something she needed to do at work and not about Marsh and not about the room in the basement and not about the letter she had written. I choose to believe it was a good morning and that she was okay until she wasn't. That's the version I can live with. It might not be true, but I choose it. Last month I hired a woman to help me with the garden, the one Margaret planted that I had let go to seed, and then gradually, over the past year, begun trying to restore. Her name is Carol. She's retired, she comes on Thursday mornings and knows considerably more about perennials than I do. We drink coffee before we start, and she tells me about her grandchildren and I tell her about mine, and we disagree cheerfully about whether the hostas need to be moved, and then we both work in the garden for 2 hours and I feel, when she leaves, that the day has been worth something. Margaret would approve of this. She was not the type to want me to stop living. She was the type who, faced with a man stealing from sick children, spent a year building an airtight case against him in secret, while holding down a job and coming home to make dinner and coaching our younger daughter's soccer team through the spring season and laughing at the table and kissing me, hello and goodbye, and never once letting me see how afraid she was. She was the bravest person I have ever known, braver than I could have been, braver than I realized until I was standing in a basement reading a letter she had written, knowing she might not survive to see what it started. If you are watching this, I want you to know something. The people who love us are capable of extraordinary things for our sake, things we will never see and may never know. The burden of that love is real, and sometimes it is heavy, and sometimes people carry it alone when they should not have to. If someone in your life is carrying something, try to see it. Try to make it easier for them to put it down. Margaret didn't put it down because she didn't want me to get hurt. I understand that. I forgive her for it. But I would have carried it with her. I would have stood beside her every step. Don't wait until it's too late to let the people who love you know that you can handle the truth. That's what I would ask. Don't wait. My older daughter called this morning. My youngest grandchild said his first full sentence yesterday. She put him on the phone and he said, "Hi, Grandpa, I see you," which is apparently something he hears a lot in their house when they video call. I said, "Yes, buddy, I see you too." He laughed and handed the phone back, and my daughter said, "Mom would have loved that." "She would have," I said. "She would have called everybody." We laughed. The kind of laugh that is also crying a little, the kind that holds both things at once. Then my daughter said she had to go get the kids to school, and I said I loved her, and she said she loved me, and we hung up. The garden is coming in well this year. The hostas won, for the record. Carol was right. I carry Margaret's letter in my jacket pocket whenever I leave the house. Not the original, that's framed. A photocopy, folded twice. It's worn soft at the creases now. I take it out sometimes when I'm sitting somewhere quiet, a park bench, the waiting room at the doctor's office, the seat by the window at the coffee shop 2 blocks from the house. I don't read it anymore. I know every word. I just hold it. It's enough to hold it and know it exists. To know that she left it, to know that the last thing she gave me was the truth, and that the truth was enough to do what she needed it to do. We got him, Margaret. We got him. And the fund that carries your name has helped 43 families since they rebuilt it. 43 kids who are still here because the money came through. 43 families who will never know your name, but who are whole because of what you did in a basement with a flashlight and a filing system and the same patient precision you brought to every problem you ever decided to solve. Rest now. You've more than earned it. The light in the study is warm in the evenings. I sit there sometimes with a book I am only half reading, and I listen to the house and I think about the 27 years we lived inside it together, and I am grateful. Not fine. Not healed, exactly, but grateful. For every ordinary Tuesday. For every cup of coffee. For the woman who carried everything she couldn't give me and still found a way to give me everything I needed. That's what love does, I think. It finds a way. Even through basements and stone walls, and 3 years of silence, it finds a way to be known.